November 19, 1864. I slept in my clothes last night as I heard that the Yankees went to neighbor Montgomery's on Thursday night at 1 o'clock, searched his house, drank his wine, and took his money and valuables. As we were not disturbed, I walked after breakfast with Sadie up to Mr. Joe Perry's, my nearest neighbor, where the Yankees were yesterday. I saw Mrs. Laura Perry in the road surrounded by her children, seeming to be looking for someone. She said she was looking for her husband, that old Mrs. Perry had just sent her word that the Yankees went to James Perry's the night before, plundered his house, and drove off all his stock, and that she must drive hers onto the old fields. Before we were done talking, up came Joe and Jim Perry from their hiding place. Jim was very much excited. Happening to turn and look behind as we stood there, I saw some bluecoats coming down the hill. Jim immediately raised his gun, swearing he would kill them anyhow. "No, don't," said I, and ran home as fast as I could with Sadie. I could hear them cry, "Halt! Halt!" and their guns went off in quick succession. Oh God, the time of trial has come. A man passed on his way to Covington. I helloed to him, asking him if he did not know the Yankees were coming. "No, are they?" "Yes," said I. "They are not 300 yards from here." "Sure enough," said he. "Well, I'll not go. I don't want them to get my horse." And although within hearing of their guns, he would stop and look for them. Blissful ignorance. Not knowing, not hearing. He has not suffered the suspense, the fear, that I have for the past 48 hours. I walked to the gate. There they came, filing up. I hastened back to my frightened servants and told them that they had better hide, and then went back to the gate to claim protection and a guard. But like demons they rush in. My yards are full. To my smokehouse, my dairy, pantry, kitchen, and cellar, like famished wolves they come, breaking lots, and whatever is in their way. The 1,000 pounds of meat in my smokehouse is gone in a twinkling. My flour, my beet, my lard, butter, eggs, pickles of various kinds, both in vinegar and brine, wine, jars, and jugs are all gone. My 18 fat turkeys, my hens, chickens, and fowls, my young pigs are shot down in my yard and hunted as if they were rebels themselves. Utterly powerless, I ran out and appealed to the guard. "I cannot help you, madam. It is orders." As I stood there, from my lot I saw driven, first, old Dutch, my dear old buggy horse, who has carried my beloved husband so many miles, and who was so quietly weighed at the block for him to mount and dismount, and who at last drew him to his grave. Then came old Mary, my brood mare, who for years had been too old and stiff for work, with her 3-year-old colt, my 2-year-old mule, and her last little baby colt. There they go. There go my mules, my sheep, and, worse than all, my slaves. Alas, little did I think, while trying to save my house from plunder and fire, that they were forcing my boys from home at the point of the bayonet. One, Newton, jumped into his bed in his cabin and declared himself sick. Another crawled under the floor. A lame boy he was, but they pulled him out, placed him on a horse, and drove him off. Poor Ned, the last I saw of him, a man had him going around the garden, looking, as I thought, for my sheep, as he was my shepherd. Jack came crying to me, the big tears coursing down his cheeks, saying they were making him go. I said, "Stay in my room," but a man followed in, cursing him and threatening to shoot him if he did not go, so poor Jack had to yield. James Arnold, in trying to escape from a back window, was captured and marched off. Henry, too, was taken. I know not how or when, but probably when he and Bob went after the mules. I had not believed they would force from their homes the poor, doomed Negroes, but such has been the fact here, cursing them and saying that Jeff Davis wanted to put them in his army, but that they should not fight for him, but for the Union. No, indeed, no. They are not friends to the slave. We have never made the poor, cowardly Negro fight. It is strange, passing strange, that the all powerful Yankee nation, with a whole world to back them, their ports open, their armies filled with soldiers from all nations, should at last take the poor Negro to help them out against this little Confederacy, which was to have been brought back into the Union in 60 days' time. My poor boys, my poor boys, what unknown trials are before you! How you have clung to your mistress and assisted her in every way you knew! I have never felt that slavery was altogether right, for it is abused by men, and I have often heard Mr. Berg say that if he could see that it was sinful for him to own slaves, if he felt that it was wrong, he would take them where he could free them. He would not sin for his right hand. The purest and holiest men have owned them, and I can see nothing in the Scriptures which forbids it. I've never bought or sold slaves, and I've tried to make life easy and pleasant to those that have been bequeathed me by the dead. I've never ceased to work. Many a northern housekeeper has a much easier time than a southern matron with her 100 negroes. Never have I corrected my slaves. A word was sufficient. Never have they known want of any kind. Their parents are with me, and how sadly they lament the loss of their boys. Their cabins are rifled of every valuable, the soldiers swearing that their Sunday clothes were the white people's, and that they never had money to get such things as they had. Poor Frank's chest was broken open, his money and tobacco taken. He has always been a money-making and saving boy. Not infrequently has his crop brought him $500 and more. All of his clothes, and Rachel's clothes, which dear Lou gave her before her death, and which she had packed away, were stolen from her. Ovens, skillets, coffee mills, of which we had 3 coffee pots, not one have I left. Sifters all gone. Seeing that the soldiers could not be restrained, the guard ordered me to have their, of the negroes, remaining possessions brought into my house, which I did, and they all, poor things, huddled together in my room, fearing every moment that the house would be burned. A Captain Weber from Illinois came to my house. Of him I claimed protection from the vandals who were forcing themselves into my room. He said that he knew my brother Orrington. At that name I could not restrain my feelings, but, bursting into tears, implored him to see my brother and let him know my destitution. I saw nothing before me but starvation. He promised to do this, and comforted me with the assurance that my dwelling house would not be burned, though my outbuildings might. Poor little Sadie went crying to him as to a friend, and told him that they had taken her doll, Nancy. He begged her to come and see him, and he would give her a fine waxen one. Sadie's doll was found later in the yard of a neighbor, where a soldier had thrown it, and was returned to the little girl. Captain Weber felt for me, and I give him and several others the character of gentlemen. I don't believe they would have molested women and children had they had their own way. He seemed surprised that I had not laid away in my house flour and other provisions. I did not suppose I could secure them there, more than where I usually kept them, for in the last summer's raid houses were thoroughly searched. In parting with him, I parted as with a friend. Sherman himself and a greater portion of his army passed my house that day. All day, as the sad moments rolled on, were they passing not only in front of my house, but from behind. They tore down my garden palings, made a road through my backyard and lot field, driving their stock and riding through, tearing down my fences and desolating my home, wantonly doing it when there was no necessity for it. Such a day, if I live to the age of Methuselah, may God spare me from ever seeing again. As night drew its sable curtains around us, the heavens from every point were lit up with flames from burning buildings. Dinnerless and supperless as we were, it was nothing in comparison with the fear of being driven out homeless to the dreary woods. Nothing to eat. I could give my guard no supper, so he left us. I appealed to another, asking him if he had wife, mother, or sister, and how he should feel were they in my situation. A colonel from Vermont left me 2 men, but they were Dutch, and I could not understand one word they said. Tonight, when the greater part of the army had passed, they came up very windy and cold. My room was full, nearly, with the negroes and their bedding. They were afraid to go out, for my women could not step out of the door without an insult from the Yankee soldiers. They lay down on the floor. Sadie got down and under the same cover with Sally, while I sat up all night, watching every moment for the flames to burst out from some of my buildings. The 2 guards came to my room and laid themselves by my fire for the night. I could not close my eyes, but kept waking to and fro, watching the fires in the distance and dreading the approaching day, which, I feared, as they had not all passed, would be a continuation of the horrors. November 20, 1864. This is the blessed Sabbath, the day upon which he who came to bring peace and good will upon earth rose from his tomb and ascended to intercede for us poor fallen creatures. But how unlike this day to any that had preceded it in my once quiet home. I had watched all night, and the dawn found me watching for the moving of the soldiery that was encamped about us. Oh, how I dreaded those that were to pass, as I supposed they would straggle and complete the ruin that the others had commenced, for I had been repeatedly told that they would burn everything as they passed. Some of my women had gathered up a chicken that the soldiers shot yesterday, and they cooked it with some yams for our breakfast, the guard complaining that we gave them no supper. They gave us some coffee, which I had to make in a tea kettle, as every coffee pot is taken off. The rear guard was commanded by Colonel Carlo, who changed our guard, leaving us 1 soldier while they were passing. They marched directly on, scarcely breaking ranks. Once a bucket of water was called for, but they drank without coming in. About 10 o'clock, they had all passed save one, who came in and wanted coffee made, which was done, and he, too, went on. A few minutes elapsed, and 2 couriers, riding rapidly, passed back. Then, presently, more soldiers came by, and this ended the passing of Sherman's army by my place, leaving me poor by $30,000 than I was yesterday morning, and a much stronger rebel.